Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. Tonight we sit down with Seth Funk, candidate for Maryland Delegate in District 1C, for a conversation that goes deeper than campaign talking points. Across the country, younger voters are walking away from both parties. Nearly half now identify as independent, and growing numbers are openly embracing socialism because they don't see a path forward through traditional politics. We're talking about why that's happening, what it means for Western Maryland, and whether the system is failing this next generation. Now let's get into it. Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I'm your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And we have a very distinguished guest tonight. We have Seth Funk. Seth is running for office. Seth, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what position you're seeking?
Yeah, so thanks so much for the introduction. I'm Seth Funk. I'm running for the Maryland House of Delegates in District 1C, which is pretty much west of Hagerstown, cutting into just before Cumberland in Allegheny County.
So you are Western Maryland, obviously, from Hagerstown all the way out to Cumberland.
Yep.
And you live in that area, I assume.
Yeah, so I live in Williamsport, Maryland. I moved here in 2024. I've lived around this area my whole life because my parents lived right down outside Fairplay, Maryland. But I mean, I went to Williamsport High School. I got my Eagle Scout from here. So I've been in Williamsport my entire life.
Because it's not so common anymore, tell us a little bit about what an Eagle Scout is.
So an Eagle Scout is the highest rank that you can earn in what was called Boy Scouts of America. I think now their name is Scouting America. It takes years of dedication and work. You have to earn so many merit badges, which is accomplishing tasks in a certain field. Like I have, there's first aid, citizenship in the community, the state, and community, the nation, and the world. There's three different ones. I mean, there's a bunch. I think at this point, there's probably 100 or maybe even closer to 200 merit badges you can get. You have to earn so many of those. And then the big culmination of that is a big service project that you have to do in the community. Mine was rebuilding or actually just building benches. I think I built about 25 or 30 benches that are actually in Williamsport Park. There were a few of us because I needed to get about 60 total, so they split it up between a few people.
As far as your leadership in the area of politics, creating law and policy, kind of what is your additional background that you are bringing to the position potentially here?
Yeah, so as I said, I'm born right here. So I went and got an associate's in political science from Hagerstown Community College. And then I went and got a bachelor's in political science and public policy from St. Mary's College of Maryland. And then I came back here and I started working a lot in the community. I've organized with Indivisible. I've organized with the local chapter and branch of the Democratic Socialists of America. I've worked with a few other organizations for protecting farmland, going against the data centers, warehouses, our homeless population, the drug epidemic that's out in this area. So been doing that since I got back from college.
So you mentioned the Democratic Socialists of America, which, Seth, your generation uses the word socialist very easily. Our generation's not so much. And some of the voters you're going to be appealing to vote for you are going to be, they're going to have a visceral reaction to the word socialist. How do you plan on dealing with that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I make very clear when I'm running is that I'm running as a Western Marylander first, and I'm running as someone that's lived in this district. I'm running as someone that's I'm very working class in this district. I'm not wealthy. I have a college background, but it certainly isn't something I'm elitist about. So when I organize with the Democratic Socialists of America, it's because anybody who is involved in politics for more than 5 minutes, heck, you turn the TV on to the news for 5 minutes, you can figure out pretty quickly that both political parties have aims and agendas that are not in interest of average Americans, not in interest of the working interests of these people. And so you go looking outside for other areas that you can help people of your class. And, with the DSA, the program and the policies that they put forth, the work that we do in the community is only centered on working class individuals and their needs. We're not trying to make a buck for a corporation. We're not trying to make a buck for ourselves. It's only for those needs. So, that's why I got involved in that. And I can understand that some of the voters out here going to have kind of a visceral reaction. But what I'd ask is really just, look at the policies that I put forward, look at what I'm trying to do, look at the vision I'm bringing forth. I don't want people to vote for or against me because of an organization that I've been tied to or because of a certain letter under my name. I want them to look at the vision that I've laid out and look at what I'm proposing to do, and they agree that that's what's best for this district, because I think that it is.
And of course, our current situation in the state of Maryland, and as a delegate, what you would be doing is you would actually be voting on and proposing laws that affect everyone in Maryland. You'd be going down to Annapolis and working on laws. And of course, the situation that we are in right now in Maryland is, you mentioned a couple of them. We have issues statewide with crime. Williamsport is one of the higher areas, not as high as Hagerstown and Washington County, but fairly close. There are issues with homelessness, affordability,
drug addiction,
and also taxes. Taxes are, we are now the 7th highest taxed and feed state in America. Soon to be, I believe we're going to jump up to number 5. So with all of these different things, and obviously that is a mouthful, but in general, kind of what are some of your policies that you're looking at to handle these issues?
Yeah, so especially when we're talking about the tax level in Maryland, when we're looking at taxes at a foundational level, the point of taxation is that we give a portion of whatever the tax is on to the government, and then we get some kind of service back on that. The traditional ones are roads, the postal service, school, so on and so forth. But what we're seeing nationwide, but specific to this district, is that the level of taxation is not being met with the quality of service, the level of service, the accessibility of service. You mentioned affordability, and that goes into taxation because the state and the kind of zeitgeist of politics is that we try to not go too hard on corporations, big businesses, very, very wealthy individuals and entities, because there's this idea is like, oh, if we're nice to them, they will, bring jobs into the state. We see this with data centers in Frederick County. We see this with the big sphere that they're putting up in PG, that if we can give incentives to these big businesses, they will bring in jobs. But what we're seeing as a result of that is that working people are getting taxed. They're running into this crisis of affordability, and there's not services or any kind of ability for them to get the benefit of that tax. I am not in favor of raising taxes of working people. I'm not. There's plenty of money out there that it doesn't have to come from people like me, people like you guys that are just trying to get by. We gave $50 million in state funds to that sphere in PG County. And sure, that's going to bring in money for the state. But again, we're getting told we can't put money towards constructing housing. We can't put money towards energy generation. We can't put money towards funding our schools, toward substantial reductions in poverty, which would address the crime and drug crisis that you mentioned. But we can give money for these capital projects, these massive tech companies. We can chop up farmland, which is a big thing out here in Western Maryland. So that is where this disconnect really comes in, is that there's money to give corporations, there's money to give these big businesses, but when working people try to band together and try to get something, all of a sudden there's no money left.
That is the fact that socialists are not considered friends of big business, and big business is the one that provides the jobs. And as you said, if you're not going to tax the working man, those taxes have to come out of corporations, and those corporations do flee states with higher taxes, especially states that tend to lean more socialist. So what's your plan in dealing with that?
So I think when I'm talking about taxation on wealthy businesses, it's not like, well, we're just going to come for everything. Screw you guys. But we definitely can be a lot more smart about where we get our funds, and definitely be a lot more, how do I put, we can get the funds that are out there to get that don't make this state, that will make the state affordable for working people, but also aren't about pricing out the businesses that exist. Yes, I'm in the DSA, but I'm not bringing a socialist revolution to Western Maryland, because, I'm here to address working needs in Western Maryland. So, one of the things that we have here is problems with energy generation. That's a big part of my platform, is that energy crises energy costs are out of control. And so one of the plans that I bring forth is bringing in new energy generation that is in control of the local governments. This removes the business incentive of a massive utility or a massive energy company to overcharge for electricity prices, but also the revenue of this energy can go into local budgets. You said, I think we're raising to like the 5th most tax and feed state. I'm not looking to make that number 1. I'm looking to redistribute the money that we have in a way that it makes this state affordable. If we're going to have taxes, which I think we should, if they are actually going to services that help working people. And some of that is going to be stuff that benefits businesses too. You know, when people have more money, they can spend more at businesses.
The BG&E, the power company for Baltimore and the surrounding area, said about 20% of their customers were unable to pay. So I guess specifically, how would you change this whole system, this apparatus here for the residents of Washington County?
It's one of those things that you don't think about. Like you walk into a room, you flip a switch, the light turns on. You don't think about where all that comes from. And then you start looking into it and you go, oh, actually, one of this is incredibly interesting and also vitally important. So when we're talking about the driver of costs, right now, you're right, we did close power plant. They bid on energy in a national energy market and in some cases, international energy market. They released earlier in 2025, maybe mid 2025, that they had overpaid, that they had pretty much said, hey, we thought we were going to have all this energy. We bought it, and now we're paying way more for less energy. So that's part of the reason that the fees went up. And that's also some reasons you're seeing that them fast tracking a few energy needs. When I'm talking about how that we address this, I know you mentioned renewables, and I know some people are going to balk at that. When I talk about bringing energy into the district, the fastest energy that you can bring online is solar energy. If you like, assuming all things equal, once you've got funding and a plan, you can have it from construction to online generating energy in a year to 18 months. There are funds at the state level, grants for that already. It just takes a delegate who's willing to go out and get that energy. That'll lower bills just by price of energy, because if you're looking at your energy bill, yeah, there's all these fees, but the big one that's driving that cost is that generation charge. And there was some of that transmission charge as well, but it's largely generation. How much is it costing to generate it? Funding mechanism that no longer relies on the state, but also isn't lining the pockets of a CEO. The money is going towards our issues.
So, Seth, there's on issues like education, public safety, taxes, there's always this dichotomy between local control and state control. Where do you fall on those issues?
There are things that make sense for locals to control, and there are things that are more are easier and more efficient when you scale them. So when we're talking the planning of infrastructure that's going to be going through multiple areas, that's something that the state can have a vested interest in, because they're going to be where a lot of that funding comes in. Washington County is not necessarily, or Allegheny County is not necessarily, say, going to be able to hypothetically build a massive new or a road system from Cumberland all the way into DC. They're just not going to be able to get the money as a county. That's some place where the state can come in. A lot of the way that we view federals, it applies locally. So when we're talking about local issues that I think by and large can be done locally, I think things are best administered locally, even if funding comes from the state. So that's why I'm talking about with renewable energy. I talk about there's money at the state level for this because they set this aside. But I want the benefit to go here because it's going to remain in here. When I talk about the revenue, we already know that they get taxed by the state, then goes to the state, and then the county has to fight for it back, even though it came from them in the first place. With this type of plan, that revenue just goes straight into the county budget. They don't have to fight for that back from the state, and then they can administer how it see fit. When it comes to things like education or healthcare, I do think that there is sense that the state has a vested interest in making sure that our education meets a certain standard statewide in the same way that maybe a federal government would nationwide. By the same sense, we should probably be teaching the same type of math, the same type of science statewide. So it comes down to a point of the state should set what I might consider, I don't want to call it a minimum, but a standard. The state should set a certain standard, and then places can build off of and leave some vacancy that places can build off of to talk about their local history, their local economy, jobs that are applicable to their area. That way our students are still getting the same general level of education, but maybe if they're out here in Washington County, they'll learn more about agriculture. Whereas if they're in Baltimore, maybe they learn about the big industry that used to be there and the naval shipyard and trading that goes on there. And if they're down in St. Mary's County, which is where I went to school, maybe they'll learn about a lot of military history and the military jobs that are there. So that is what I mean when I say there's a standard that the state can set, and then counties or local municipalities can build off of that.
A lot of people have criticized the fact that Maryland is so much higher than surrounding areas with the amount of crime and drug use, et cetera, because of lax laws. One person who deals with the homeless community said that a couple of years ago, a homeless individual, when he was asked why he came from New York City, he pulled up on his cell phone a picture of a advertisement in Penn Station in New York City saying Hagerstown, and listed off all the services that they offer for drug addicts. What are you thinking? How would you improve that situation?
Yeah, so it's really important when we're talking about like crime and drug use, that a lot of this is related to poverty, lack of opportunities, and the income of that. But one thing that doesn't get it when we talk about like the clinics that are going for helping these people get back on their feet, but go back to being functioning members of society, is you also have to get them out of the situation that got them there in the first place. So that comes with having access to housing that is actually affordable. That comes with having access to job training so they can get move past, either get a job in the first place or get into a higher paying job that can get them out of this area. Because if you plop a clinic down in whatever community that has this drug epidemic going on, but you don't have a way for them to get out of there, we know that drug use and poverty are very isolating itself. So you tend to form these small circles. Well, those small circles are having the same situation that you're in. And say that I'm a deeply motivated individual who wants to get out. And I go to the clinic, do that, but then I come back and I'm surrounded by people that are doing drugs, surrounded by people that encourage me to do drugs. It is, and I do understand that we got to have, personal discipline. But also it's like, taking a fat kid out of the candy store, shoving him full of salads for 2 days, and then putting him back in the candy store and saying, no, you can't have that. Even if he is like really, really wanting to not to, you're putting him in front of the thing that you're trying to get rid of. So having access to housing that is outside of that area, having access to job training so that they can be surrounded by people who are also trying to make better of themselves and be productive members of society. This is really important to address. You cannot just plop a clinic down into a community and say, there you go, guys, we've solved it. We are seeing reductions. I think we saw a 22% reduction of drug overdoses in the area, which is a good start. It's definitely not, the final solution. It's definitely not, the final area we want to get to. Another thing of building the funding mechanisms through these projects and this funding through the state. One way that that money could be going towards is to build housing that is placed in control of the community. They can decide, the rents, they can decide, all of that is controlled by them, the rents, the services that are offered, but you put it out of the areas that are being affected by drug use so that people can get away from these influences.
So, part of that crime initiative, Seth, is that recently the Maryland General Assembly prohibited local sheriffs from participating with the 287G program. Your sheriff, the sheriff in Washington County, the sheriff in Frederick County, they all support the 287G program. What's your position on the 287G program, and moving forward, how do you see it working?
Yeah, I don't support the 287G program, especially with the way that we're seeing ICE now. All that we're seeing is it's creating a lot of fear in our communities. It's creating a lot of, I don't support the idea of any government, regardless of ideology, operating what is essentially a secret police force that can go into a community, grab someone with or without a warrant, take them to who knows where, and then transport them anywhere to avoid the legal system. It's really important to note that when we're looking at the system that we're seeing now, these foundations and systems were laid by President Obama, the deporter in chief, as he was called at the time. Obviously, Donald Trump has expanded them and altered the way that he used them for his administration. But they were laid by Obama. They've been expanded by Donald Trump. So then I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, well, the next president, they can also expand this if we want. And if they expanded it, say it's a Democratic president who decides he's going to use ICE or some similar force to go around kidnapping Christians. I wouldn't support that then. So I understand that people they want to address the immigration issue that has been going on in this country for decades. I'm not going to sit here and say that our immigration system is fine, like some people will. But I think when we're looking at these programs, when we're looking at the way that we do it, doing it in such a way that creates so much fear and division in a community and is done with very little oversight and very little means of really understanding what's going on and being able to address it with due process, it's not the way to go. You're making people fear government. And I think in some ways, some conservatives should resonate with that. We're always talking about limited government, and that's one thing with the DSA is we don't want this giant government that some people think that we do. We have a lot of protections for civil liberties. So me wanting to have accountability of government is one reason that I don't support these 287G agreements and the way that we've been doing immigration through them.
With the 287G program, essentially what it is when police officers arrest someone for committing a crime, whatever it may be, robbery or whatever. And they are taken to the jail and processed. So no one's out in the streets under the Maryland 287G program arresting someone to be as a suspected illegal. So someone committed a crime. They come to the jail for booking. At that point, they say, okay, are you here legally, illegally? If they determine that they're here illegally, they run their name through a database that is operated by ICE. And if their name pops up, they contact ICE. They say, hey, there is someone here who committed a crime in our community, and you have them listed as being wanted for having been convicted of a crime in some other community. Do you want to come and get them? Of course, the idea is that because they are illegal immigrants, they are not citizens. So the idea of due process is different for someone who is not a citizen of the country as opposed to someone who is. The sheriff's described is that because of their participation in the 287G, essentially ICE does not have a presence in Western Maryland and the other counties that cooperate with that program. The exact scenario that you described is going to arise because ICE does have a presence in those areas where the 287G program does not exist.
Yeah. So first, the smaller one would be the due process for citizens versus non-citizens. I think that when we start making delineations on who gets due process and what type of due process that they get, you very quickly muddy waters into how easy it becomes for a government to label someone as whatever this other group is that gets less due process, and then very easy able to do repercussions on that. So for me, the way that I look at it is it has to be full due process for everyone, or it's not due process for anyone. When I'm talking about that, I want a civic process that prioritizes, freedom, justice, equality, due process, access to all these things. It doesn't matter to me whether it's guy that looks like me, a white guy who lives in Western Maryland, whose family descends from, Scottish people, or if it looks like someone who's, a woman whose family descended from people in Mexico. To me, that doesn't matter, because if their due process is threatened, then that can be used against me at some point with some stretching. So that is my general view on due process. It has to be complete for everyone, or there's a threat for everyone. So first off, with 287G, we do know that statistically, I think it was something like 60-70% of the people that were pushed through, that were collected through that process, were there for misdemeanors. So it's not a violent crime. It's something like you ran a red light, or you went through a stop sign, or some other very minor crime that I think that is not worth going through the real horror that people have been seeing with immigration and custom enforcement. And then in response to this, will bring ICE into the community. With the 287G agreement, you have now made it so that people are scared not of national officers, not of people that are coming into a community, but they're scared of the very members that are in that community. They're scared of Frederick County members. They're scared of Frederick County citizens. They're scared of their Frederick County officials. If we're talking in Washington County, they're now scared of Washington County officials, people, citizens, their neighbors. We are creating a system of mistrust. I don't know if I can trust my neighbor. I don't know if I can trust my elected official. I don't know if I can trust the cop that's on the corner. In the sense of that, I think that's very much worse, because you are creating just this overview of fear of people that are supposed to be your neighbors and supposed to look out for you, where programs like 287G create a system where that cannot be the place. And I don't think creating mistrust in our communities, especially right now when we are very polarized. It's the reason this podcast exists. We're so polarized, we don't talk to each other. adding to that with a program that creates this mistrust is not the way to address this.
What is the delineation between the programs you're talking about and the cost that they have versus the programs that other Democrats that currently are in control of Maryland with a supermajority have been putting in place, and the 16% deficits that we're headed towards with those programs?
Yeah, so the delineation there is that those programs are not done for the community benefit in the way that mine are. A lot of them are still done through private entities. When we're talking about spreading renewables, I'm not just talking about like, oh, let's give more funding for renewables and, that'll go through, I think we have Potomac Edison out here. It's either Potomac Edison or Pepco. Let Potomac Edison collect all that and this will be great. Let's just build housing and this will go to another developer. Let's do XYZ thing, but it's all still done through corporations. Fundamentally very different. And another thing that I talked about earlier is being a lot smarter and rethinking of the way that we're doing taxation. They labeled data centers as critical. I'm going to go to data centers. I know that follow me here. Data centers are labeled as critical infrastructure in the state of Maryland. This passed in 2024, 2025. I can't remember exactly, but this puts them on the exact same level as water or electricity in terms of how quickly they're allowed to go through the permitting process and the type of benefits that they get from the state. I don't think I'm crazy when I say we do not need data centers in anywhere the capacity that we need water or electricity. We've also given them tax exempt status where just in 2024 alone, it grew to like, I think $22 million that we lost in 2024. That was before the massive explosion that we've seen and also are planning to see going forward that we've lost in exemptions for that. We so often are seeing our tax dollars go to these corporations and these big businesses, tech companies, whatever you want to put to, because it is the political ideology that has dominated politics on both sides. Until very recently did it really start to get a serious challenge. It's been going on for about 40 or 50 years. This idea that if we make things really great for business in every way, that will trickle down. Trickle down economics is not an economic theory. It's just theft, because we've seen that these corporations, they get this money, whether it's from the government or because we just spend more on them. They get this money and it doesn't go to workers. It doesn't go to infrastructure. It doesn't go to making lives better. They'll put it in stock options or they'll put it in ways that are no longer trickling through the economy. So going back to what I bring in this that is different from the typical politician in this is that I'm not interested in signing a bill that gives sales exemptions to data centers. I'm not interested in labeling them as some kind of critical infrastructure. I'm not interested in giving $50 million to a big giant sphere in Prince George's County at a time when Maryland is short 100,000 housing units, has started some plans to address that, but it needs to be done at a very rapid pace to keep up with growth. When we're facing a problem of electricity prices, we don't need to be like, well, how can we make this profitable for business? No, forget what BG&E, forget what the PJM, forget what Pepco, forget what these utility companies are going to make. We need to make this so people can afford to live. My energy bill jumped from roughly $250 a month for my 2-bedroom apartment to $600, $700, somewhere in that range. I know someone who jumped from $400 to $1,500 a month. At that point, I don't care what utility you are. I don't care how many utilities you got in the mix. I don't care if you want to break them up so you consolidate them. I don't care. Bring energy generation online so that we can lower costs. Build housing units so we can lower costs. We don't need to be given tax exemptions to these corporations that are making hand over fist. We don't want to be given tax exemptions to people that are already making tons of money. Take the money that we're making and make life more affordable. That's the only attitude that I'm bringing into Annapolis. I don't care what party that you're in. I don't care what ideology you subscribe to. If you come to me with a bill that is not about making life more affordable, that is not about getting revenue that doesn't come from a working class household that's already struggling to pay for bills, electricity, and rent, I'm not interested in supporting that. The only thing that goes through my mind is, how does this bill make life more affordable? And if it doesn't do that, then I'm not passing it. I'm not signing on to it. If they want to pass some milquetoast energy bill, for instance, that puts funding into energy, but all of it's just going towards corporations and none of it's really actually going to lower bills, like the bill that they just passed through now that they're trumpeting they are cutting some of the Empower program, and they are trumpeting $150 yearly savings as this great accomplishment. I'm like, cool, $150 yearly is like the bare minimum that I would have accepted in this. If I was on the floor there, I would have thrown amendment after amendment into that on, flooding municipal and county solar to bring energy generation online. I would have flooded amendment after that to block utilities upcharging customers for a broad host of things. You don't need to upcharge customers because you want to raise your CEO pay, your shareholder pay. I would have put amendment after amendment on that. I will use the power that a delegate has, which is really to be annoying. If you can't block a bill, you can be really annoying by just throwing amendment after amendment to prioritize only working families. That's the only thing that that's the only thing that goes through my mind when I look at a bill.
The DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, have kind of come out of nowhere in the last few years and have now playing a dramatic role in the Democratic Party nationally. Can you explain to our viewers what this is?
Yeah, so I can explain this going back to 2008. You guys remember the Tea Party movement? Remember all of that? If you're plugged into politics, we will recall that. The Tea Party movement was a very grassroots movement on the conservative libertarian side that basically thought that Republicans were not doing enough to go against Obama at the time, and in general, not help the working people in the way that they wanted to do it. So they, through many years, have really succeeded in making the Republican Party into what it is today. And we're seeing very similar effects on the left, which would be how the DSA is emboldened. This is working class individuals who are sick and tired of the politics that usual that has dominated the nation at every level. It's very odd. It's very easy to look at the big ticket items like Mamdani winning in New York and AOC and Bernie Sanders a few years ago. It's very easy to look at the rise of the DSA as, man, this came out of nowhere. But when you're looking at it as going 25, 30 years back, you have had a consistent political ideology in this country at the top where let's give as much breaks as we can to very wealthy individuals, very big businesses, not even talking just regional businesses. I'm talking, your Apples, your Googles, your massive conglomerates that are making hand over fist, ship jobs overseas for cheaper goods. We don't need to raise wages if things are cheaper, so on and so forth. Costs are going up. Everything's getting more expensive pretty much, but we're not really seeing a rise in wages. You're seeing this consistent theory of 30 years back at the top of let's just keep that stable and we'll figure things out piecemeal. And people are tired of that. People are tired of waiting around for the next piecemeal handout. People are tired of waiting around for $150 a year savings on their energy bill. When you're talking you guys probably see this, but even especially my age, when you're talking just the massive cost of getting just the fraction of what our parents had, when you're talking about everything being ridiculously expensive. If you want to be a little silly, talking about how everything's a subscription service now. I know that makes me sound like a boomer, but everything's a subscription. I got to pay a monthly fee. When you talk about the costs going into life month after month, day after day, you look at the politics. People are supposed to lead us. The people are supposed to govern us. And $150 off my energy bill a year. That's what you could come up with? We're not building housing units. We're not getting a medical facility. Washington County, Meredith's emergency room, 3-hour wait times. And we don't have a plan to address that. People get tired. And that's what the DSA, that's what the Tea Party represented. And that's what the DSA is doing now is people are tired of the politics of usual, of let's just keep things running. People are wanting things to be different. They want change. And I don't think that we should boggle at change. We can wonder where it's going to take us. We can wonder what it means. But I think everybody in this district, in the state, in the region, in the nation, we can all agree that the things as they're going now it doesn't work for working. It doesn't work for average people. It doesn't work for those of us that are getting up in the morning, going to work every day, coming home and just scraping by enough to get the bills. Now it's not functioning in the way that it did for our parents, and things need to change. And so when politicians aren't willing to do that, when they're not able to do that, you get these kind of movements. You get this kind of sentiment of, well, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to go do my own thing and find a way that will. And I think that's exactly what the DSA represents, is people getting tired of being ignored. I know that socialism is a scary word, especially for people in this district. I'm not in this to talk about the glories of some socialist ethos that people might think it is. I go to the DSA because the organization and the policies that put forward are the best for the working class that I see, and they align with what I want to do with the working class. And so that's the idea that I'm coming into this district, is what makes this district best for working families. And I think that change is going to happen. And I think that, we're going to continue to see movements if things do not go forward where life becomes easier for working families.
This is the reason that Mid-Maryland Votes exists, because of different ideas. I've never heard anybody quite compare the Tea Party and the Socialist Party of America as having similar birth origins. But that was fascinating, man. We enjoyed hearing from you, Seth. Thank you very much for being a guest on Mid-Maryland Votes. If people wanted to help you out during your campaign, Seth, how could they do that?
Yeah, thank you so much for having it on. I appreciate programs like this. As we said, different backgrounds coming back from here, but at the end of the day, we have a lot more in common than we do apart, because we're both people just trying to get by. If you'd like to connect with my campaign, they can find me at funkfordelegate.com. Very simple, FUNKFORDELEGATE. Funk's a great name for this because it makes it really easy. You can email me, funkfordelegate@gmail.com. I think all of my socials are Funk for Delegate, except I think Facebook, which is Seth Funk for Delegate. So yeah, they can find me anywhere on there. My platform's all up. You can contact me, ask me any questions you want. I'm happy to answer. I love programs like this, and I love talking to voters because I'm a bit of a policy wonk. So I like talking about how things work and how they would go forward. So feel free to ask questions.
Well, Seth, we enjoyed having you, man. Thanks for being a guest.
Yeah, thank you so much again.
All right, that wraps up this episode of Mid-Maryland Votes. I'm your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And we want to thank Seth Funk for being on the show as well. If you liked what you heard tonight, go ahead and share it with a friend. If you hated it, share it with an enemy. We're equal opportunity entertainment. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Mid-Maryland Votes. Thank you to Seth Funk, candidate for Maryland Delegate, offering a perspective that reflects a growing shift among our younger voters. Whether you agree or not, the reality is hard to ignore. More young Americans are rejecting both political parties and searching for something different, driven by frustration with rising costs, housing, and opportunity. The question is whether that energy leads to real solutions or deeper divisions. Thanks for tuning in to Mid-Maryland Votes. Like, follow, and share for more content like this, and we'll see you next time on Mid-Maryland Votes.